Welcome to History at the OK Corral. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this episode with a fellow history lover. And now, on to tonight's episode. Springfield, Missouri, 6 p.m., July 21st, 1865. As the sun begins to set in the muggy summer evening, Wild Bill Hicock walks towards the small town square with an unnerving focus and intensity. His red hair, famously worn long in the custom of the Army Scouts and native warriors as a taunt to their enemies looking to scalp them, is wet with sweat and falls out from underneath his wide-brimmed hat in unkempt tangles. He is looking for his longtime acquaintance, and by many accounts, good friend, a man by the name of Davis Tutt. But recent events have turned their once amicable relationship sour. Now, Bill Hicock is intent on settling their feud once and for all. Born James Butler Hickok in Homer, Illinois in the year 1837, he had fled his hometown at the age of 18, after a fight with a local man named Charles Hudson, in which both men had fallen into a canal in the scuffle, and both assumed the other to have been swept away and drowned. Hickok fled to Kansas, where he joined up with the vigilante anti-slavery group known as the Jayhawkers. In 1857, he was elected as one of the first of 4 constables of the Monticello Township in Johnson County, Kansas. In 1859, he had joined with the parent company of the Pony Express, known as the Russell, Majors, and Waddell Freight Company. The following year, Hickok was gravely injured when he was attacked by a grizzly bear, necessitating several months of recovery. In 1861, Hickok was involved in a shooting incident in Rock Creek, Missouri, in which a disagreement over a property payment between local citizen David McCandless and Hickok's friend Horace Wellman ended in a confrontation which resulted when an unknown gunman, by some accounts Hickok himself, shot McCandless while concealed behind a curtain. Hickok, Horace Wellman, and an employee of the Rock Creek station at which the incident took place named J.W. Brink were tried for murder but found not guilty on the grounds of self-defense. While the event is mired in debate and obfuscation, it is known that Hickok was so consumed with guilt over the incident that he visited and personally apologized to McCandless's widow and offered her all the money he had to his name, a sum total of $35. However, the consuming horror at whatever had taken place that day would have little time to fester in the mind of Bill Hicock. After the outbreak of the Civil War, Hickok would sign on as a teamster for the Union Army in Missouri. In short time, he would become a wagon master. However, in another event in Hickok's past clouded in uncertainty, he was dismissed from the Army in 1862 for reasons unknown. In short order, though, he would find himself riding as a member of James Henry Lane's Kansas Brigade, where he would reportedly meet a preteen Buffalo Bill Cody. In the fall of 1863, Hickok was again serving in law enforcement as the provost marshal of the Springfield Detective Police. This, too, however, would not be a long-lasting endeavor for the 28-year-old. He would go on to work as a scout for General John B. Sanborn before mustering out of that service and, in 1865, making his way to his present location of Springfield, Missouri. Here, he had embarked upon a career as a gambling man, earning his living from his winnings in local saloons. And it would be in the saloons of Springfield that Wild Bill Hicock would meet and befriend fellow recent arrival Davis Tutt. Tutt, aged 28 or 29, has followed an oddly similar life path to Hickok's. Born in Yellville, Arkansas in 1836, he descended from a politically influential family. At a young age, he had lost several members of his family, including his father, Hansford Tutt, to what became known in Arkansas as the Tutt-Everett War. After the outbreak of the Civil War, Tutt would enlist in the Confederate Army, serving in the 27th Arkansas Infantry Regiment. Though he would serve in the Confederacy throughout the duration of the Civil War, it is proffered by several historians that he actually became a double agent towards the end of the war, working as an informant for the Union. Regardless, after the conclusion of the war, Davis Tutt had his sights set on settling out west. But, on his way, he had stopped in Springfield, Missouri, attracted by the lure of the lively gambling scene. Here, he and Wild Bill Hicock had first met and become relatively fast friends. Though accounts of the depth of their friendship vary, the two were on amicable enough terms to which Hickok had borrowed money from Tutt on occasion. This habit, however, would prove the initial spark in their conflict. As Tutt's own finances have become increasingly strained, he has sought to call in Hickok's present debt to him. The day prior to this, Tutt and Hickok had argued over the exact amount of the loan Tutt had issued. Hickok, who by all accounts had dealt honestly thus far with Tutt, claimed his debt to be $25, while Tutt insisted it was in fact $35. Hickok, already slightly insulted by Tutt's assertion that he was trying to short him by $10, insisted that he would have to check his logbook for the amount that he had recorded when he took out the loan. Tutt, growing equally uneasy under his financial situation, insisted that he be allowed to hold Hickok's gold pocket watch as collateral until the debt had been settled. Much to Hickok's chagrin, Tutt claimed the gilded timepiece and held it overnight. In the interim, though, he had been doing more than simply holding on to his proposed collateral. For much of this day, mutual friends of the two men have attempted to act as mediators, carrying messages to and fro in an effort to assuage any escalation in conflict. But, much to their frustration, Davis Tutt has continued to not only stagnate negotiations, but to continually antagonize Hickok by wearing his pocket watch out on the local town square, proclaiming to anyone within earshot that Wild Bill Hicock is not a man to be trusted. In the honor culture of the Old West, this was grounds for violent retribution, as a man's reputation, especially a gambler's reputation, as an honest man, was essential to both his safety and financial welfare. Fed up with the attempts at negotiation and incensed at Tutt's public effrontery, Hickok now enters the town square, his eyes scanning the area for Tutt. On his waist, Hickok wears a pair of .36 caliber 1851 Navy Colt revolvers, their handles facing forwards. Every morning, including this day, he begins his day by cleaning his prized firearms, ensuring that they will not misfire in the event that their use is called for. The pistols weigh heavily on his thighs as he walks, a constant, visceral reminder of their presence should they be needed. Though it is a common misconception that gunfights and shootouts were an accepted norm of life on the American frontier in the 19th century, many towns or establishments banned the open carry of firearms, and the notion of a one-on-one pistol duel, carried out in the street in front of the local townspeople, was an altogether foreign concept to the average person in the Old West. However, today, at least for the townspeople of Springfield, Missouri, that is about to change. As Hickok makes his way to the local courthouse, he spies Tutt, still openly wearing the pocket watch he had taken from him. Now, in a veritable fury, still roughly 100 yards away at this point, Hickok begins to close the distance between himself and Tutt. As he walks, he exclaims to Tutt from across the town square, "Don't you come around here with that watch." Tutt, himself having grown increasingly indignant and angered at Hickok's refusal to acquiesce in their dealings, turns so that he is facing sideways towards Hickok, who by this point is roughly 75 yards away. The bustling town square, once full of local citizens out to shop, eat, and socialize, clears of all but the most curious of onlookers, as the certainty of oncoming violence causes most to seek cover. In a scant few seconds' time, Tutt, standing his ground, reaches for the revolver on his own hip. With this minute movement, which takes only milliseconds to make, Davis Tutt seals his own fate. At the same moment Tutt's hand flashes towards his holstered weapon, Hickok's right hand moves across his own body, drawing the pistol from his left hip. Tutt manages to bring his weapon to bear on Hickok and fires upon his tall, long-haired opponent. But the shot misses. At essentially the same time, Hickok returns fire. By some accounts, he steadies his Navy Colt revolver upon his left forearm, before firing off a shot that strikes Davis Tutt between the 5th and 6th rib. Tutt grasps his side and cries out to his friends who are watching, "Boys, I'm killed." In a grisly and regrettable scene, the terrified Tutt now scrambles like a wounded game animal in a directionless, instinctual flight. He runs onto the porch of the courthouse, then back into the middle of the street, leaving a streak of gore, before his adrenaline-fueled legs give out and he finally collapses. A sickened collective silence falls over the spectators for a distinctly prolonged instant, before friends and onlookers swarm towards Tutt's body in an effort to assist the dying man in any way that they can offer. Meanwhile, the local sheriff makes his way towards Hickok, who offers up his weapons with no resistance and freely admits to having killed Tutt in the gunfight. he is subsequently arraigned for manslaughter, briefly placed under arrest, and made to stand trial. The trial, which lasts a mere 3 days, sees Hickok acquitted on account of his engagement with Tutt being one of, quote, mutual combat. Conflicting testimonies and eyewitness accounts would state that Hickok was the only man who had fired, or that he had not in fact called out to Tutt from across the town square. And the jury would ultimately conclude that Tutt's flaunting of the watch in public had been adequate grounds to incite Hickok to violence, thereby justifying, even necessitating, the confrontation. It would be mere weeks after the shootout, and Hickok's subsequent not guilty verdict, that a writer for the New York City publication Harper's Magazine named Colonel George Ward Nichols would conduct a series of interviews with the former scout-turned-gambler and gunfighter. The subsequent publication of Hickok's story turned him into a national celebrity virtually overnight. Local sentiment among the citizens of Springfield, though, proved not to be entirely in Hickok's favor, as he would run for the position of town marshal only months later and lose decidedly in what many saw as a collective statement of townspeople believing him to in fact be guilty. Davis Tutt would be laid to rest in the Springfield, Missouri cemetery, though 18 years later his body would be disinterred and reburied in the Maple Park Cemetery by his half-brother, Lewis Tutt, himself a product of Davis Tutt's father's extramarital relationship with a female slave. Hickok would, however, go on to greater fame over the course of the ensuing decade, before himself meeting a violent end at the hands of a disgruntled gunman. In the annals of Old West history, few, if any men, can lay claim to as much influence over the cultural landscape of the time as Wild Bill Hicock. He was the prototype for the late 19th century American frontiersman, equally capable on the trail, at the poker table, or in a gunfight. Hickok was, in fact, a deeply complex and thoughtful man, far from the steely-eyed, swashbuckling image that is often portrayed in modern media. He did, however, live a violent, dangerous life, one in which he would live by, and die by, the gun. But the many tales of the deeds, daring, and ultimate demise of one of the Old West's greatest characters are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Thank you for joining us on this episode of History at the OK Corral. Be sure to click the like button, share this episode with a friend, and become a subscriber. Also, if you'd like to support our work and gain early access to episodes, as well as ad-free viewing, you can become a member of this channel by clicking on the join button below. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time on History at the OK Corral, home of history's greatest shootouts and showdowns.